With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the AgNet News Hour.
This is a fairly significant day in terms of a new industry that will, I think, create opportunities for farmers and producers. Will no doubt also support quality job growth in rural communities across the United States and allow our aviation and marine fuel industry to provide international and domestic leadership in terms of low carbon alternatives and provide for a safer and better environment. All of that, I think, is wrapped up in what is going to be announced today and what will continue to be done in connection with the development of sustainable aviation fuel. I'll tell you what, let me stop in the interest of time. I know she is. In the interest of time, let me start taking your questions about other things, and then I'll come back to.
To start today, we continue from Washington, D.C., where farm broadcasters had a special session with Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack on Tuesday. He talked on two primary topics with us, the outbreak of the highly pathogenic avian influenza and the announcement on the GREET program. We'll have his remarks on the HPAI coming up in a few moments, but we start with his comments on disaster assistance.
It seems to me that emergency relief is designed to try to provide help and assistance to those who have been impacted by disaster. And of course, we've had a wide range of disasters over the last couple of years, and that has impacted and affected the bottom line for producers. Producers who are very large in scale obviously have losses, but they also are the beneficiaries of the current structure and system. They are the ones who get a disproportionate amount of the farm income. They are the ones who benefit most directly from crop insurance and the indemnities that were paid through crop insurance. The folks who are really struggling, the folks who are on the edge, are the small and mid-sized producers who don't necessarily get the lion's share of farm income and don't get full benefits, in some cases any benefits from crop insurance because they're not in a position to be able to afford to purchase crop insurance. So for that reason, when disaster assistance is distributed, it makes sense to try to make sure that you keep as many people on the farm as you possibly can. Now, it's easy to do this, very easy to do if Congress does its job. And by doing its job, it essentially balances the amount of money they're providing for emergency relief with the amount of relief that's needed. Now, they did that in 2021. We essentially told them in 2021, hey, the losses amounted to about $10 billion, and Congress appropriated $10 billion. So it was very easy to give everybody a sufficient amount of assistance. In 2022, we said the losses were somewhere between $10 and $12 billion. And I think the expectation on the countryside was that the amount of assistance that would be forthcoming would be roughly equivalent to what was received in 2021. The problem is Congress only appropriated $3 billion. So when you only give the department 30% of the need, or even less than 30% of the need, it makes it difficult to basically satisfy the expectations of folks out in the countryside. So what we attempted to do was to make sure that the folks who needed the help the most, the roughly 89% of 93% of farms that don't generate more than $500,000 in sales, that only got 11% of the income in a record farm year of income, and received a significantly less percent of the crop insurance, $19 billion of indemnities that were paid under the crop insurance program. So we tried to provide some additional assistance to them. The way we structured it, 82% of the producers received more money, 18% received a little bit less. And no doubt the folks who received less were perhaps operating under the false expectation that the amount they were going to get would be the same, very similar to what they got the year before. But you can't do what they got the year before when you got 30% of the money that you got the year before. So look, we want to keep people on the farm. Congress is going to do what it's going to do, but I think we need to understand, and they need to understand, and Senator Marshall needs to understand, that the structure and system provides a lot of help to folks who are large. It doesn't provide as much help to folks who are small and mid-sized. And I'm not satisfied, and I don't know whether he is or not, but I'm not satisfied with losing 544,970 farms since I started representing farmers in the crisis of the 80s. That's a lot of farms we've lost, and we've lost a lot of farmland. And I think this country needs to wake up to the loss of these farms and to the loss of farmland, and that we need to ask some very serious questions about the structure of what we're doing in terms of giving people the opportunity to maintain their farming operation. Or the notion of get big or get out will be the driving philosophy, which I frankly don't agree with. I think we need to create entrepreneurial opportunities for folks. I think we need to create structures and systems that provide assistance to keep people on the farm. We've helped over 42,000 farmers who do business with the USDA and they do business with the USDA in terms of loans because they can't often get loans from a commercial banking operation because they're on the edge. So we're the sort of the lender of last resort. And during a difficult period, sometimes folks get behind, and we try to provide some assistance and help. And the idea here is to keep people on the farm and to help them be more profitable. To be more profitable, our theory is you have to create more revenue streams. You can't just survive on the sale of corn and soybeans or sorghum or wheat or whatever you're growing or whatever you're raising, because you're raising a commodity, and a commodity has very low profit margins. So you, by the very nature of it, you have to produce a lot of it. And when you have to produce a lot of it, you have to have larger and larger farming operations in order to eke out the profit. And that's essentially the system we have right now. And I think it's been difficult for rural America because I think it has significantly reduced the population. The population has aged. The population is poor in many of those rural areas, and I think we have to be serious about this and address it. And so that's a long way of answering your question, Jeff. But I think it's a really, really important question, and I think we have to ask it. Whose side are you on? Who are you for? And I want to keep those small and mid-sized folks in business because, frankly, all of you in the broadcasting world depend on those people. Because you got fewer people living in rural places. You got fewer people buying whatever it is you're selling on the air and advertising. So you shrink that rural population. You're shrinking opportunities not just for farmers, ranchers, producers, but you're shrinking it for everybody. And when you shrink that, you also shrink the pool of people that we draw from to defend this country. So I think it's really important stuff.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We continue now with remarks from Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack on the outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza, or H5N1.
The basics and fundamentals of H5N1 have not changed since the beginning of this process when we first detected the virus in the cattle. The risk to people is low. The dairy cows are recovering, and there's no indication of mortality, and the food is safe. So really, at the end of the day, that's really what you need to know, and that's what people need to know. Now, I can talk to you about all of the things we're doing that are underlying and supporting those three conclusions. I can talk about the testing that we've done and we continue to do on milk and beef to make sure that folks are reassured. I could talk about the federal order that we put in place designed to limit the risk and minimize the risk by preventing the transportation of dairy cows lactating dairy cows that have the virus so that they don't spread the virus. I can talk about our efforts to work with farmers to try to get information, going on the farm and visiting with them and talking to them about their operations so that we understand and can appreciate how this may have started, how it may have spread. We continue to need farmer cooperation in that sense. I can talk about the research that we continue to do and which we frankly were doing before all of this, certainly as it relates to poultry and vaccines. I could talk to you about keeping an eye on the recovery of these dairy cows to determine whether or not there is a lingering impact or effect of the virus on productivity. And I can talk about our efforts to reach out to producer groups, to the industry, to ag commissioners, to state veterinarians, to farm worker groups, to our own staff that work in processing facilities and grading, congressional engagement, the media, all of you folks, which you are the ag and farm media. There is the political media, there is the social media, and there's a legacy media. So all of that is going on. But at the end of the day, there are three things you need to know. One, the risk to people is low. Two, the food is safe. And three, the cattle are surviving. And there's a lot of conversation around all of this, but if you remember those three things, you're remembering the most important aspect of all of this. In the meantime, there are lots and lots and lots of people working 24/7, and I will tell you that our team has worked incredibly hard and attempted to work in a collaborative way with folks who are also working hard on the CDC and the FDA side in terms of this situation. So I think it's just really important that you know that.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. With a preview of what you'll be hearing today on AgNet West, here's Farm News Director Brian German.
Research from McKinsey & Company has shown that a large majority of American farmers have a good understanding of sustainable farming. The research indicates that while 90% of farmers understand sustainable farming practices, the actual adoption rate remains low, with most farmers implementing them on less than 30% of their acreage. Despite this, there's optimism for the future as farmers express willingness to adopt these practices. However, significant barriers remain, including the difficulty of obtaining market premiums for sustainable crops and implementation challenges. The study reveals the adoption of sustainable practices is linked to perceived return on investment. Behavioral changes such as reduced or no-till methods are more readily adopted than those requiring equipment or product changes. To encourage wider adoption, McKinsey suggests strategies like offering long-term revenue streams and expanding sustainability programs and education. House and Senate Ag Committees have each released a 2024 Farm Bill overview. Senate Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow presented a comprehensive plan blending ideas from over 100 bipartisan bills, stressing the importance of cooperation to finalize the bill by year-end and addressing issues like foreign land ownership, rural support, and SNAP adjustments. House Chairman Glenn G.T. Thompson also unveiled a bipartisan approach focusing on supporting farmers and ensuring funding viability. Both proposals aim to adjust reference prices and potentially expand crop insurance and allow farmers to add new acres. While both committees aim for enhancements in crop insurance and conservation, differences persist in addressing nutrition programs. The release of a Farm Bill overview from each congressional committee is a positive development, indicating an eagerness to work towards establishing a new Farm Bill before the last extension expires on September 30th. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association and Public Lands Council have expressed concerns about the latest rule altering the management of public lands for multiple uses, including livestock grazing. The Bureau of Land Management's final Conservation and Landscape Health Rule is being criticized as lacking congressional authorization and undermining the balanced management mandated by the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. Ranchers argue that the rule complicates engagement in conservation efforts and exacerbates conflicts. The organizations note that the proposed changes could disenfranchise permittees and jeopardize grazing activities which play a vital role in landscape health and generate significant economic returns. NCBA notes that despite the concerns raised, BLM proceeded with the rule, potentially altering the relationship between federal agencies and grazing permittees. UC Agriculture and Natural Resources is hosting the Nichols Soil Lab Annual Field Day next week in Arbuckle. Registration will open at 8:30 on the morning of Tuesday, May 7th at the Nichols Soil Lab. The first cycle of the event will begin at 9:20 and feature topics including fertilizer applications for fertilizer efficiency and orchard health, a table olive harvest trial update, as well as an update on navel orangeworm and carpophilus beetle from Cooperative Extension Specialist Houston Wilson. The second cycle of the field day will include presentations on the Butte County Groundwater Recharge Action Plan, a walnut rootstock trial for nematode management, and an update on a walnut dormancy breaking trial from Cooperative Extension Orchard Systems Advisor Kat Jarvis Sheehan. More information about the field day is available on the upcoming events page at agnetwest.com. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
More rain these past few days of April means improved overall topsoil moisture for the country. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey.
As of April 28th, very short-to-short ratings for topsoil moisture nationally at 25%. That is down 3 points from the previous week. Surplus topsoil moisture inching up from 11% a week ago to 13% surplus.
Focusing on key agricultural areas,
we see surplus topsoil moisture now in 7 states, mainly across the Mississippi Valley, into the Corn Belt and the Great Lakes region.
With reports of 20 to 40% topsoil moisture surplus. Lingering wetness also remains in the Northeast. Dryness is apparent in parts of the Rockies and Great Plains and is subtly appearing in the southern Atlantic region.
Florida, 47% topsoil moisture very short to short, also creeping up to about 1/3 very short to short this week. North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia all ranging from 33 to 37% very short to short.
I'm Ron Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
For this past fiscal year, the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, was given an extra infusion of $2.8 billion to work with farmers on soil and water conservation projects.
45,000 contracts. That is the most that we've ever had in the history of our almost 90-year history.
NRCS Chief Terry Cosby told a group of farm broadcasters in Washington that for this fiscal year, instead of $2.8 billion for conservation work,
we're talking a little over $5.5 billion that's out there in the offices, in the field offices, and we're going to have another tremendous year.
Biggest challenge is having enough trained people in the field to handle all the projects. Cosby says his agency is partnering with outside organizations to help out.
If you name an organization, we probably have some type of agreement with them for their expertise.
Meanwhile, Cosby says NRCS is reaching out to farmers big and small to let them know about USDA's conservation programs because, as he puts it,
every acre counts.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Here's Chuck Zimmerman.
I'm visiting with John Rossum with the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, and at the moment of this interview, he is still president of the National Agri-Marketing Association. But the gavel's going to be passed, and I just want to get some words of wisdom from John. What kind of things do you feel the organization or you accomplished in this last year?
This year, Chuck, really was about rebuild and recovery yet still from COVID. You know, that was a heck of a time, and for any organization like NAMA, which is really all about face-to-face and being together and communicating, COVID was a challenge. And nobody wants to say that C word anymore, but the reality is that a lot of associations are still coming back, and you know, this past year has really shown us that NAMA is back.
Well, give us some examples of this, because we are here in Kansas City, which has traditionally been our highest attendance. I don't know what the highest ever was. I don't remember, but how do we do this year?
We did really well. We were over 900 people at the conference, which is a lot more like 19 and previous versus, you know, some of those mysterious COVID years. But we also saw a really good return of the student competition. We were a little low on schools this year, still under our record high, but they're coming back. And a lot of those colleges that participate in the student marketing contest really had a tough go for a few years. And when you have 2 years without that student contest, you lose all that institutional knowledge from all those juniors and seniors, and you're starting over. And we're starting to see that rebuild, and it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I was overhearing somebody talking to another agency person about their student chapter where they are, and just talking about how they are rebuilding. And so I heard that from them, and mine is Gator Nama, University of Florida. Same thing. We had a very small team here, but we need more support from the university, and it kind of went away, and we're trying our best to talk them back into it.
Yeah, I mean that's the heart of the challenge right there. There's got to be a champion at the school, someone who for one reason or another have found a way to learn about NAMA and really understand that student competition is probably the best thing that students are going to do and most valuable for their careers in the future. Most valuable thing through their entire college year. And once you get that champion in a school that wants to fight for it and build the program, either somebody that's already on staff or when you've got alumni in the area that can help push to help find that person, that's when it takes off.
How about for the conference itself? There weren't major changes, but things were tweaked a little. I know we're going to have to do the survey and kind of get some feedback on this, but what do you think of like that first night of the party, I guess you call it?
Yeah, the new networking event. This year's conference was bigger, bolder, more. The conference committee was charged with trying to find things to do that were a little different. They added another session in. We had elevated speakers, honestly, that so many great comments on yesterday's speakers. Looking forward to today's as well here in the final session. The networking events, boy, Wednesday was literally a day of networking. And that's what NAMA is all about, is getting together with smart people in one place and sharing and learning.
So you've gone through a leadership process here to get to where you are, and again, COVID kind of made that a little longer period, I think.
It did. Fortunately or unfortunately, the record holder of longest term on the board. There was a small group of us that took a seventh year, basically 2020 to 21. We just held over the board because there was, honestly, it wouldn't have been fair to our president at that time to not have any events and not be able to fully participate. So it was a good thing that COVID was just I hate bringing that up again, but it was a challenge. And a nonprofit or organization board like NAMA, when there's no challenges, it's really easy to be on the board. It's really easy to participate and get involved. And when you've got a big challenge for the organization, it gets a little bit more difficult. It's a little more work, and that's where that's what really matters, and it's really important to be involved.
So coming out of COVID and talking about recovery, how about from a financial standpoint? Because there had to be an impact of that. Although I think NAMA has reserves set, but it only goes so far.
Yeah, we did very well financially through COVID. Jenny and the staff just did an amazing job at tightening the belt and tweaking a little bit. Our revenue is based on memberships and events, and if you don't have events, you don't have the revenue, but you also don't have the expenses that go with the events. So it was a bit of a dance, but like many other associations, we made her through.
SimCom can talk about that for sure. I know we're not the only ones, believe me. But anything else you might want to say about your year at NAMA? What kind of value for you personally?
It's really been all about the friendships and the relationships that I've had with people over the years. It's been a heck of a long time. It was 30 years ago I started with the student contest. 31, okay. And the people that I've met along the way have just been so important in my career, even as my career has shifted. And each new venture that I undertook, there was a reason to reconnect. And as long as you have a touch with agriculture, this organization is just so important to be there. Any type or any touch of marketing that you have, if you're in ag, you need to be in NAMA. It is a family. I've been saying that a lot this week, that there's so many people that come here for the first time, and it's an eye-opener for them that, holy cow, there's all these people and they're so willing to talk. And you talk to people who are brand new in their career, and they sat down next to the president of an ad agency and had a great conversation, and they were just talking to another marketer. That's all it was, and that's NAMA.
Well, congratulations on your year as president for the National Agri-Marketing Association, or NAMA, and we're looking forward to a great one next year with our new president, Laura, who will be coming in, and we'll be getting to talk to her and find out what she's got planned for the future. So thank you very much, John Rosum. We're here at the Agri-Marketing Conference. I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We'll be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's today's featured interview.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Rivera with Western Growers.
My name is Kara Timmons with Western Growers.
And we're here today with our guest, Stuart Wolf, President and CEO of Wolf Farming and Processing. Stuart is also the recently elected chair of the Western Growers Board of Directors. Welcome, Stuart. Glad to have you with us this week.
Thank you. It's great being here.
So let's give our listeners a little background about you and Wolf Farming and Processing.
The company was started by my father and mother in 1974, and I think one thing that's kind of interesting, Dad was 57 and kind of put everything on the table to buy a couple thousand acres in western Fresno County. And we started Wolf Farming Company, and it's grown from that point, and now we grow a handful of crops that where California we think has competitive global advantage, like this is the best place in the world to grow them. These are also crops where we enjoy our best return per acre foot of water, and water's our limiting factor here. So we run like all of our budgets against how much do we earn per acre foot of water as opposed to like invested capital, if you will. Turns out all these crops are nutritionally dense, and typically they're all like mechanically harvested, and so they don't have a heavy labor burden associated with them. My dad early on kind of got the crop mix right and then invested in some processing facilities where we process some of these crops that we grow. So we're in the tomato processing business. We produce a lot of tomato paste, and we're in the almond processing business. And believe it or not, we're producing some almond paste there that goes into almond milk.
And now, well, in this podcast episode, we are going to be covering a Mythbusters Almonds edition, and we're going to be going over some misconceptions we've all heard about the industry and almonds. This topic was discussed recently by Governor Newsom and Bill Maher. Myth number 1, almond trees require excessive amounts of water.
Well, let me first start by saying I happen to really like Bill Maher. I think he's hilarious. I think he's super smart, and there's a number of things that I've actually listened to in my car, like when he's talking about universities and how screwed up they are and everything. But I think on this deal, I think he just got some numbers kind of mixed up, and it came out, and it was, he just got it mixed up. And specifically with the governor, he was asking the governor what he's going to do about almonds, which to me is just kind of a funny question to begin with. But he essentially said that a pound of almonds requires about 1,900 gallons. And if you do the math and you look at the average yield of almonds in the state, it's about 2,500 pounds. Plus, it's a little bit less than, but just say it's 2,500 pounds. And if you multiply 2,500 pounds by the gallons of water, it equates to about 14 to 15 acre feet of water. So that would be, if you just visualize an orchard, the water consumption and use that he's talking about would be 14 feet high on that field. And I would submit to you that if you put that much water on any crop in California, you would kill it. Okay, he just got the, God love him, he's got so much stuff going on in his head, but that he just got wrong. The number really for most almond growers is closer to about 3.5 to 4 acre feet per acre. So it's close to that number, that metric that some folks years ago at Mother Jones, they wrote an article and they said an almond takes about a gallon of water. That's actually, if you took all the water applied and just put it on the pounds of almonds, you would come up with a number closer to that.
So you have a lot of ways to conserve water. What are you doing in your operations that are allowing you to do that?
Well, what we're doing, and it's what most growers in California are doing, all of California agriculture, most all of it, there are some areas where there's a little better access and reliability on water, but most areas of California are water deficient. And so this is our limiting resource. So like any limited resource, you got to really manage it well. And so if you look at like I think it's something like 85% and more, or slightly more than 85% of all almond growers use either micro irrigation and water scheduling and whatever. Water is actually not only a scarce resource, but everybody thinks it's cheap for agriculture. It's one of our most expensive inputs. But I want to go back to just the general perception about almonds and water, because there's no doubt this crop has been so successful in California that over the course of time, growers have planted about 1.5 million acres of almonds. And I want to point that out because when I came to California, back from business school and everything, and to farm, in those years, there was about 1.2 million acres of cotton grown in the state. And cotton was always talked about how much water cotton uses. And it was true. If you take the amount of water times the acres, it's a big number. But if you look at it on a per acre basis, it's quite a different story. So, we grow a lot of row crops like onion and garlic and processing tomatoes and what have you. And most row crops use about, 2 3/4 acre foot to 3 acre feet per acre to grow a crop. And almonds use about 3.5 to 4. So let's just say they're using about 25% more water than a row crop. So there's no doubt you have a lot of acres and they are using a bit more, but it's not a crazy amount more than row crops. And you think about it intuitively, a plant the size of a tree is going to use more water than the plant the size of a little shrub or, what have you. For me, the real question is the water being used efficiently? And the other question is, is that gallon per nut really the right number? And I would argue it's really not. An almond tree produces more than an almond. An almond tree produces annually almond hulls, almond shell, and an almond meat. And the almond meat represents about 30% of the total weight that comes off of that tree. So the big end of the cow there are almond hulls. And almonds, if you think of an almond is nothing more than kind of a peach pit, where the almond doesn't flesh out and form a peach. It has a hull, and the hull has sugar in it. And it's a terrific feed source for dairy animals. So in the state of California, if we have a 3 billion pound crop of almond meats, that means we're producing about 3 million tons of hull. And all that hull goes to dairies and what have you.
You are listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news, here's Rod Bain.
We are seeking to address a need that we've heard from across the country related to the need for more farm labor and stable, affordable, suitable housing for that workforce.
What USDA Rural Development Undersecretary Basil Gooden is referring to is a recent notice of funding, $48 million for farm labor housing.
We have two components. We have the off-farm component of farm labor housing and then the on-farm farm labor housing.
And regarding the breakdown of funding,
$43 million would be made available for the off-farm farm labor housing component, and that can be utilized by nonprofit organizations, by farmers, federally recognized tribes, individuals that are in the housing arena to actually provide housing that will go for farm labor workforce and their families.
Funding applicants have until July 3rd to submit proposals for the off-farm labor housing program, with details via the Federal Register. On-farm labor housing funding applicants are accepted on an ongoing basis, with information available at www.rd.usda.gov via the Programs and Services tab on the home page.
When we talk about the farm labor workforce, it's individuals that are either currently involved in agriculture or farm labor or retired from farm labor, given some restrictions, or disabled from farm labor and their families.
The Undersecretary adds that priorities for application consideration include projects reducing climate pollution and increasing climate resiliency, equitable access to rural development programs and benefits, and increased market opportunities and infrastructure for rural economies. He notes the importance of partnership in developing and constructing farm labor housing.
We invest in solutions that come from our partners, certainly the housing nonprofits. Collaboration partnerships are just critical to the work that we do. We actually partner with national programs, housing programs, and some of our partners like HAC. We also work with entities that look at preserving housing, and housing preservation is a key component of what we do as well.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Many food shoppers would probably like to forget the year 2022. That year, amidst COVID and many supply chain issues, grocery store food prices went up a lot, by about 11.5%. Now, the usual yearly average increase is a bit above 2%. And last year saw prices go up by a still historically large 5%. However, food shoppers may get a little bit of a break this year. The Agriculture Department's new forecast for this year is for a food price hike of only 1.2%.
That would be the lowest percent change since 2019.
Economist Megan Schweitzer tracks food prices for the Agriculture Department. Now, up until a few days ago, Megan was forecasting a 1.6% food price hike. But during March, food prices on average did not go up at all, zero food price inflation.
And so that is part of what's contributing to our annual forecast being adjusted down.
That plus relatively low inflation rates for other things that affect food prices.
For example, energy prices are up 2.1% over the year, and gas prices are up 1.3%. Prices for unprocessed agricultural commodities have just begun increasing again in the past 2 months, but they had declined for a year and a half before that. And they're still down about 20% since peaking in May of 2022.
So Megan is looking for food at the grocery store to cost very little more than it did last year. However, if you do a lot of takeout or eating out, the news is not quite as good.
So our forecast for 4.2% growth in food away from home prices it's a bit higher than the 20-year historical average. That's been an average of 3.4% per year over the past 20 years. It's down a few percentage points from the growth we saw in 2023, which was 7.1%, and in 2022, which was 7.7%.
But restaurant food prices are still rising at a much faster pace than grocery store food. Megan says restaurant prices are, of course, composed of more than just the cost of food.
You have a lot of other factors going into food away from home prices, like food service costs, the costs of wages and rents. And so those contribute to sort of a different pattern of food price increases for food away from home compared to food at home prices.
Generally, restaurant food prices do rise faster and farther than food bought at grocery stores. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.